how do you feel about the consulting tier list that people have made? I think over the years, there has been sort of this pyramid that people have built based off of a firm's reputation, prestige, how much you're getting paid, the type of project.
Yeah.
And it's like there's MBB at the top, and then tier 2, and then big 4, and then boutique firms. How do you feel about this traditional like hierarchy and tier list ranking of firms?
Honestly, well, I think one thing is the tier list always varies depending on like what you're looking at, who you're talking to. But I think that there is some weight to the tier list. And what I mean by this is like that tier list is partially based off of like employee benefits, but mainly driven in prestige, right? Like obviously MBB is at tier 1 because they have the most prestige. And then tier 2 is like the most following prestige. But I think that when it comes to like things like benefits and like opportunities, like those are also varied across the firms. Like obviously there's some weight to it. Like likely MBB is like are leaders in pay, but funny enough, a lot of boutique consulting firms are actually like will probably pay more than MBB.
Wait, really?
Yeah, a lot of boutique firms. Sometimes even like OW and Kearney pays more than.
Are you for real?
Yeah. So like I can tell you at least for starting off, like Oliver Wyman is a leader in pay.
Actually?
Yeah.
How much is the pay in comparison?
Can I say it?
I mean, it is general knowledge on Glassdoor, probably.
Yes. So actually, I don't know if it's accurate on Glassdoor. But typically, like I think at least Canadian starting, OW will pay like 110 base, whereas MBB pays 100 base, and that's equal for all 3 firms.
But isn't there like bonuses and other stuff?
There is bonuses, but OW still ends up higher.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so slay.
Yeah. Well, OW is known for having like a gamed bonus system where you can like game the system and get ridiculous bonuses. But like, I think it's definitely like a prestige factor. Like a lot more people definitely know the name McKinsey than the name Oliver Wyman. Not that like the exit opportunities are like much closed. Like I think the exit opportunities are quite similar. It's just like for like McKinsey, you might get like recruited by recruiters, whereas like OW, if you want to end up in a similar position, you have to put in a little more effort to actually do it. So honestly, that's like the variance I'd say. But between all the firms, it's always like also different specialties. Like I would say like OW and Bain are quite equivalent in terms of like key practices, like very like PE heavy, very like financial services heavy, maybe less like mining and oil and gas, but like those are like the key bread and butters of like Oliver Wyman, where it's like really finance heavy. Honestly, like across the firms, like they all have their own specialties. Like
McKinsey, I heard, is like public sector work.
A lot of public sector work. BCG is a lot of
is it like sustainability or something?
It could be sustainable. It's CPG, like retail. Yeah, a lot of retail work. They have like most of the like retail and consumer goods clients. Bain is mining, oil and gas, utilities, and like PE. McKinsey also has a decent PE practice, but McKinsey is really good for digital.
This is really good to know because I think most people in university only really care about prestige and reputation of the firms. It's like they don't really consider all the other opportunities and the other factors that are out there. It's like they know that MBB is at the top, and then it's tier 2, and then it's big 4, and then it's boutique. So it's like in their mind, it's like those are like the hierarchy and the ranking, and it's kind of almost tied to their own self-esteem and their self-worth as a person. Like for example, what tier of human am I? Kind of.
That's a little intense, but I can
a little
see that.
bit, but and it's like. It's kind of like you hear this saying that like, oh, like it's like MBB or bust. Like if you don't make it into MBB, you're kind of like not a loser, but like you're not. It's like it's very, very like toxic, I feel like.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Like what would you say to people who are, who got rejected by MBB and
I think honestly at the end of the day, it's just a job. And I think that's one thing that's like really helped me conceptualize a lot of like recruitment, like whether it was first year, whether it's like later in life. And I think that like at the end of the day, it's just a job. And like maybe you didn't get into like these firms that you really wanted to, but there's still a lot of amazing firms out there that like will provide you like also great compensation, also great like opportunities, and that like you shouldn't be like so pigeonholed into like seeing success in like a very narrow scoped point of view, which is honestly like easier said than done. And obviously like I'm saying it's like less fair because I'm saying this at the other side of things. Like I can't say this to like someone who's like going through the ringer, who's like trying their best to land a job. I'm saying this as like someone who obviously like is from the other side and like has a job. But like at the end of the day, it is just like, sure, it's your career and it's important. And like, you shouldn't treat this lightly. It is something that you should value. But like, it's always about like being adaptable and being like flexible and being able to pivot. Like this isn't your last shot at that firm, nor is it like the end of your life. hey, if I didn't become successful in this, like what are some other alternative options that I could pursue that will still get me to where I want?
Like you mentioned, like sometimes the compensation and like
Yeah.
maybe the promotion rate is like faster at
Yeah.
other places.
So like it honestly varies per firm, but like for example, like consulting, what's really good is it gets you out earlier. But I think another thing too is like a really big misconception, like also on like the compensation route, is like I think one thing that makes these MBB firms so flashy is that, or like so amazing, is like all the opportunities they offer, such as like MBA compensation, like they'll pay for your MBA, or like all these exit opportunities, or like secondments where essentially they'll like loan you out to another firm where you like work at that firm and get like new industry experience. But these are opportunities that are available at not just the MBB firms. Like both Kearney and Oliver Wyman have it. Like both Kearney and Oliver Wyman will like fully compensate your MBA. It's just like less publicly available. So I think that like avoid trying to write off firms just because you don't know as much about it. And that's something that I definitely fell prey to. Like I honestly did not know anything about OW until I like actually started working there and like investigating all these opportunities. So,
and if anything, like to turn things around, like sometimes working at these tier 2 firms are even better than MBB in some aspects, like you mentioned.
Work-life balance, I would say, is probably much better in some of these firms. A lot of people when I was at EY worked like a 9 to 5, and if that's something that like you value, like, so would you rather, like, it's honestly like a would you rather kind of thing. Like this is obviously like the extremities of things. Like, would you rather be working like in 80 to 100 hour work week for like 100K compensation versus like would you rather be working like a 40-hour work week for like 75K compensation?
If you do the math to like an hourly wage, it's actually doesn't add up.
Yeah. So a lot of the reasons why like people work so hard in like these like top tier consulting firms is that they're trying to like obviously like climb the ladder, but also like set themselves up for like better exit opportunities. Like the reason why like people work so hard to like put in the grind, like a very common thing is like you put in the grind for like the first 2 years in both IB and consulting so that you can like exit much better later on. And that's like the reason why. But like actually one thing that was really insightful that someone told me was like he basically was unsuccessful in like the finance and consulting recruit, but like he didn't really care because he's like my end goal was actually just to break into tech. He's like if I did consulting I would have worked 2 years in consulting and probably like jump ship to go work in tech. Same thing with finance. Like this just set me up better to do an entry into tech. And so he kind of like streamlined his thought process. He's like, no matter what, I want to end up in tech. And like sure I wasn't successful, but then he ended up at Microsoft. And like the reason why was because he's like, hey, like if that was my end goal all along, why don't I just like jump ship and do that to end it off?
Because most people don't really stay in consulting after
a lot of people leave.
Very
like,
high turnover.
Very high like churn, and people like leave the firm. Obviously there's a good chunk of people that stay and like that's how these firms are running, but a lot of people again like join consulting to like create exit options for themselves. And so it's really like asking yourself like, hey, like what do you really enjoy and what do you really want to do? And maybe you actually bypass, like you skip consulting and like save yourself the 2 years by like knowing what you want and getting there.
Yeah. Speaking of, you know, like considering these firms from a more holistic perspective, not just on prestige and reputation alone, I actually found the top 10 best consulting firms to work for in 2024 from this company called Vault. I think they do recruitment intelligence.
I think I've heard of Vault before.
Yeah. And essentially they made the list based on they made it based on prestige, compensation, culture, work-life balance, and employee satisfaction.
I think those are really good metrics.
Yes, I think it's more holistic than just prestige.
Because sure you're like it's prestige and you're making lots of money, but you're not happy. Like, does it matter?
Yeah. And honestly, what's so interesting is that I like barely recognize half of the names on this like top 10
I'm
list.
curious now.
Number 10, Roland Berger. Such a funny name.
I think it's Roland Berger.
I knew it. Roland Berger, and then Kearney. And then the Bridgespan Group. I don't even know what it is.
Bridgespan Group?
Yeah.
Never heard of
and then Putnam, I think.
How do you spell that?
Putnam. Never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
And then EY Parthenon.
Great firm.
Yes. And the Oliver Wyman. Number 5.
Lovely.
And then, what is this at number 4? GH Smart. I don't know what it is. And then number 3 is Alvarez and Marshall.
I don't know. Marcel, I think, or something.
Marcel.
Like A&M.
Oh, fuck. Yes. Oh, my God. It's Marcel, not Marshall.
Alvarez and Marcel.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it right. I'm definitely not saying the A right. But yes, I've heard of this firm too.
Yes. And then number 2, Boston Consulting Group. And number 1, Bain.
Okay. McKinsey's not even in it.
McKinsey's not even in it.
Damn, that's tough.
I think McKinsey's in the 2023 ranking, but not 2024 for some reason.
Probably employee satisfaction, maybe. That's just a guess.
How do you feel about this list?
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised, to be honest. I've heard a lot of like good things about RB and like A&M.
Yeah.
And the reason why is like people don't even put them in tier 2. And the reason why is because like maybe it's like the whole prestige factor. They don't hear about it as much. But like these firms are typically classified in like specialty or boutique firms.
Yeah.
But they're like really good firms. Like they probably pay, like I wouldn't doubt that A&M probably pays way more than like a lot of these other firms on the list.
Mm-hmm.
They probably pay the most, actually, to be honest.
Oh.
Which like a lot of people don't know about, right? Like I have a friend working at like a very boutique firm, like Alpha FMC.
Yeah, similar. And my friend is recruiting for it right now.
Yeah, there you go. And he makes the same as MBB. Maybe there's not the prestige factor, but he works 9 to 5. So like,
stop it.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So then like, and that's like typically the case for a lot of people in the office. And so like, sometimes like what seems to be like the best and like the bright spot isn't always the case. Like I would say like a big piece of advice is like look holistically at everything and consider everything. But okay, back to the point of like, how do I feel about that ranking? Honestly, I'm not surprised, to be honest, that like some of these like firms are on that list. Yeah, I think these are all like really great firms at the end of the day. Like obviously like, MBB has like prestige. I'm surprised McKinsey's not on it. But like I'm not surprised that some of these like other firms have all made the list, and even firms that you would have like never heard of. Like I haven't heard of probably like 5 out of the 10 firms on that list. Mm-hmm. I'm not surprised because sometimes these like niche specialty firms pay much better. Their employees have much better work-life balance. And also a lot of these like niche consulting firms actually have MBB consultants exit into these firms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where like they'll do like a lateral exit where basically because like they've worked so long, they have like such niche specialty practices, these firms just like have better offerings to them in terms of like benefits, work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of like these firms actually steal from like MBB firms. Still, actually, it's
like
very
poach
true.
People.
Yeah, like poach people. And I think like if they manage to poach it, like it goes to show like the strength of that firm. Last week, Oliver Wyman stole like the head of engineer at McKinsey.
Oh,
yeah.
T.
Yeah, it's probably on the news. You probably see it. But like it happens all the time, right? And like I think it's quite normal where like people like obviously there's people who like go to these MBB firms, but it's also very normal that people leave these MBB firms to like go to these other firms. But like, yeah, you can't always view everything with rose-colored lenses. And I think that like this ranking shows a lot of like that being true.
For sure. Speaking of another like general industry trend in consulting.
Yeah.
The other day we were talking about this, but you were telling me about how these days business students are actually not really landing consulting internships anymore, especially the top prestigious ones. Mm-hmm. And that a lot of other majors are stealing consulting jobs away from business students.
Yeah.
What's
I wouldn't
happening?
say stealing, but there's definitely a rise in like non-commerce. I think like recently like consulting in general and definitely like the MBB firms and the other firms have done a really great job of like getting out like what the hell consulting is. And so people from these other industries are learning about like this high paying business career, like where you learn about multiple industries, where you get to like do so many things. And they're just doing a really good job of like getting their name out to like
engineering or like computer science.
Yeah. Or like all of these other programs. And I think like because of that, like when you think about like CS, especially when I think of like Waterloo CS or anything like that, like these people have co-op programs.
Yeah.
And so how is like a second year business student going to compete with like a 4th year co-op student who's like 5 internships under their belt and like probably work as like an AI engineer at Microsoft or something?
Yeah.
Like just on like a competitive aspect, like one, there's a lot more competition now because there's so many more people from alternative programs applying. It's already competitive enough from like a business perspective, but now you add into the funnel like 3 other majors and like a bunch of people who are applying. But 2, like on a resume standpoint, a second year commerce student just simply cannot beat like a co-op student who has done 4 co-ops.
Yeah.
Because at that point they would be just starting their second year summer. And so it's really difficult for them to compete on a resume basis. So not only are they losing on like the actual like skill set or competitive component, but they're losing on like actually getting those interviews.
Exactly. And also I feel like honestly other majors are a lot stronger than business majors in so many ways. Like for example,
technically, yeah.
Technically, like engineering students, they're like train their mind to like be problem solvers and like be very technical when it comes to solving things. I feel like the only thing that they're lacking is like Microsoft PowerPoint
No, for
and
real.
like presentation skills.
No, actually.
But yeah, like the other day I was at a consulting networking event and I feel like half of the people there were like in engineering or CS. And I'm like, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, we want to recruit for McKinsey. I'm like, well, how do you guys like what? I thought you guys would do like tech consulting at like Accenture or something, but they're kind of going for the management consulting roles now.
Yeah, I think a lot of times like engineers you would think would do like eng jobs, like work at a nuclear power plant or something like that. But I think a lot of them are also just interested generally in like the whole consulting career route. And I'm seeing like a lot of times, especially like for example, Bain and even OW, there's a lot of engineers actually who are at the firm and they have like a different perspective on like the way they problem solve. They also like sometimes have a leg up on like business students. Like sure, you think like business students have like that business acumen, that background that like might help with case prep, but like engineers work so much with numbers. A big thing that business students struggle with are numbers and like
case interview math.
Yeah, case interview math. Whereas like eng kids, like they have such sharp and quick math that like that's not even something they have to be concerned about.
They just breeze over it, literally.
Yeah, and so instead they just spend their time learning like business terminology, which like let's be real, sit down for 10 minutes, you're gonna learn it all.
Yeah.
And so like it's really difficult from like a resume perspective for like business students to like land these jobs and land these like interview spots relative to these like 5-year co-op programs, but like also from like they add like a new unique perspective to like casing. Like definitely like partners who like have done like interviews 3 years in a row, interviewed like 100 people. They've only interviewed business kids and they all like have the same POV, they like have the same perspective. Whereas like when you bring in like a computer science kid who like now can see it from like all its technical aspects and like more of like a digitally innovative realm, like that's such a new fresh perspective that like consulting firms are always looking to hire for. And so like they kind of have a leg up, not just like on a resume perspective, but on like a new perspective.
Damn. Yeah. Okay, so maybe one way we business students can make up for it, or honestly so many people are watching this podcast, maybe some engineering students, but let's talk about networking, because I feel like networking has always been such a like interesting topic that people really care about. There's like no sort of rule book to approach networking and it's so personal, but there is actually a correct way to network, like you mentioned, for consulting. Like a lot of people just like, I'll let you talk about this because I think you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Of course.
Like what is the correct way to network for consulting?
Yeah, obviously it's super varied again per person, but there's a way that you could be more strategic with your networking. And like these firms have like 10,000 people that work there. You're not going to chat every single person. And like you chatting, like for example, if you are recruiting for the BCG Toronto office and you chat some random partner out of like the Dallas BCG office, that's not going to help you with your recruiting. Sure, it helps you learn a little bit more about the firm, about that particular practice, but that's not going to like help you get an interview or like get you through the pipeline. And so I think you could be a lot more strategic with the way that you network. And what I mean by this is like, for example, as I mentioned, like if you were a target school, you probably have like recruitment captains, or like actually every year, like a firm will appoint like a recruitment captain in general to lead student recruitment for like that internship.
Oh, like every single school?
Just like for that firm.
Okay.
Yeah, like OW has like its like own recruiter for like Queens, like a team head of recruitment for Queens University, but they also just have like a Toronto office team head of recruitment.
You have so much power.
Yeah, and they like basically help oversee, like they manage all the different universities and like they like connect with those to like plan events and like just manage student recruitment in general. And so like it's very important for you to like identify, maybe like go on LinkedIn and do your due diligence and like identify these people who are like pivotal and like you actually applying. Like these people have power, like they read your resume and they're the ones who determine who gets an interview. And like being able to put name to face is like very powerful when it comes to like differentiating yourself against like 1,000 other applicants. And so I would say like be very strategic in the way you network, where you're like obviously get to know like the firm quite well, but like chat with people who have like actual substantial impact on like your application and can get your interview through the door.
And that is the recruitment co-captains for your school.
Yeah, co-captains for your school, or just like the recruitment head for like that firm, that office of that year. And make sure it's really recent, right? And another thing, I think a really big mistake a lot of students do is immediately they're like, I'm going to chat with the recruiter because they're going to help me get an interview, which yes, they will help you get an interview, but a lot of students make this mistake where they'll reach out to the recruiter, get a coffee chat lined up and chat with this recruiter. And this is the first person they've chatted with from the firm. And they ask the recruiter all the wrong questions. Yeah. And what I mean by this is that you go to this recruiter and ask them like, hey, what's your day in the life of? Like what, like, tell me your most interesting consulting projects. This is not something a recruiter can answer.
Yeah.
Because they don't consult, right? Yeah. They just recruit students. And so if you're going to reach out to a recruiter, make sure you line up like very like honed in specialized questions that make sense from like a recruiter's point of view. Like be like, hey, like when you recruit for students, like what is like the biggest point of learning that you find a lot of interns who come in and then come out of internships for? Like this is something a recruiter can answer. And this is still an insightful question versus like asking them, what is a day in your life? And she'd be like, oh, I talked to a lot of students. Like that doesn't help you.
Yeah.
And so like you want to make a good impression. So like if you're going to chat with a recruiter, make sure you like think of it from that point of view. And also reaching out to a recruiter first is probably not a great idea. You want to actually know about this firm so that you can actually generate questions like that before you really like start off.
That is so interesting because in the past, I've tried so hard to like message recruiters from companies that I was recruiting for, and they never respond.
Yeah.
How the fuck do you message a recruiter? Because I'm sure they probably get like hundreds of messages every single day on LinkedIn, email, whatever. Like, how do you actually do it?
I think the best way to like connect with recruiters is not through LinkedIn. I think it's actually through email.
Yeah.
And like, it's really easy because like you could use like Apollo or like a website like that.
What is Apollo?
Apollo is basically like an email finding website where you can like, I believe it's called Apollo, where you basically find like a recruiter's LinkedIn and then you put their LinkedIn URL into Apollo and it'll reverse search and find their like company email. Ooh. Typically I'll find their phone number too. Don't do that. Email just like their company email and that will like get your foot into the door because like they check their emails like every day.
They have to.
Yeah, they basically have to. Whereas like they don't always have to check their LinkedIn and like you're probably just sitting in the request amongst like 100 other students. And so like try to email them if you can and like also try to connect with them post like an event. Like
so they know you.
Yeah. Yes. Like I just think from like personal, like think about from a personal perspective, if a random number messages you like, hey, how's it going? You're not going to reply. You're going to be like, who the hell is this? Yeah. Versus like you just met them at the event, some random number texts you and like, hey, my name is Karen. I just met you at this event. You're 100% more likely to reply. So like try to put yourself in a position where you're like attending these events where you can meet these like really crucial people. So I would say like always try to email the recruiter when possible and like try to connect with them like post event.
So I hear that there's 3 most important people that are crucial in recruitment process. Yes. There is the head recruiter, whoever they are.
Yeah.
There's the recruitment co-captains from your school, if you go to a target school.
Yes.
And then finally, the general recruitment co-captain that manages like all the schools for that firm.
Yes. That sounds about right, to be honest.
Okay.
I think some other really powerful people in the recruitment process is actually also talking to like recent alumni of your school. And the reason I say this is like because typically recent alumni of the school who work at that firm will be the ones to screen your resumes.
Yes.
Like obviously like the recruitment captains, HR, they'll screen your resumes too, but like there's so many people who apply that like 3 people can't screen 1,000 resumes, especially within like a 1-week timeline.
I think they divided it up at so many firms. It's like one here, like you get 100, you get 100, you get 100, and then it's like they like have different rounds of like screening. Yeah,
typically, and typically it's actually always like alumni from your school who screen it because like for example like a business student from Waterloo who like currently works at XYZ firm looks at a resume from someone who does Queen's engineering, they're not going to know like what the hell like this club is like they won't even know what a baseline for a good GPA would be. Right?
Oh, you're so right. Okay. Yeah.
Like they don't have any baseline. And so typically they'll try to get alumni from your program, from your school who are screening your resumes. And so if you like reach out to like associates or like actually like people who are just starting off like in the entry level, like 1 to 2 years at the firm who are recently from your school, the chance of them screening your resume is quite high.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like firms will typically try to match you to like same program, same school who are screening your resume.
You actually recruited for all 3 of the MBB firms and also got final round interviews for all of them. What are some of the main things that you learned from going through this process?
I think the biggest thing is like, again, like staying resilient. Like I definitely would say I had that mindset of like MBB or bust. And I think that's like a lot of students who go through consulting recruiting and they think that. When you think of it, like all of these firms, like consulting in general as an industry is so hard to break into. And then like secondly, not only is it so hard to break into, it's so hard to get an interview and then like progress through it. Like these firms are obviously like great firms for a reason and they have like such smart people, but like don't doubt your own personal capabilities like when you're going through the entire process too. I think that it's really easy to like be like obviously like pigeonholed into thinking it's like only these three firms that exist for like consulting and that you need to get into these firms or it's like your life is over. But I think that there's like definitely a lot of like other great opportunities out there. And I think I only realized that after having gone through consulting recruiting. I think like going through like that, it's like definitely just like being resilient and then like being like, I guess like continuing to like persevere, like whether or not you get these firms, like working hard towards that and just like rebounding from that. I think one of my biggest learnings from doing that recruitment process too was that like I think I was definitely like burning out. Like I was like trying my best because again it's like a really tight timeline. You're like interviewing for like hours on end for like these three firms that like all have like 4 to 5 interviews. You're doing it for hours and you're case prepping. I think like the whole point of like the golden window and like not burning yourself out is a really big point to like actually being successful. And so like I think after learning from that, like I think my second time recruiting was a lot more successful, only because like after doing like MBB recruitment, did I learn like, hey, I knew what like made me tick, like what made me burn out, obviously doing too many cases. And so like the second time around when I like actually recruited for OW, I didn't do any cases. And I saw obviously more success. And I think the reason why is like I learned from a lot of like my core mistakes, which was like one, like working hard towards it, but like not having maybe the right mindset. I think that's probably one of like my biggest learnings from going through that process.